So currently we're working with our player script, which some of you guys have it called movement, some of you have it called player controller, some of you have it player, some of you have it script, player script. Let's just imagine you have it called player, and that it extends mono behavior. What this means is that all of the functions that are inside of mono behavior are available to the player. That's what that little extends button means. There's a couple of different things you can do for a singleton. You can have it be for like common singletons are game managers. And that extends mono behavior. Or you got a scene manager extending mono behavior. Or you could put this inside the player code. And as we go on in this, we'll talk about some of the pros and cons of each of them. If you had, I'll say right off the bat, if you had a very, very big project, like you were working with like 30 or 40 other developers on a really extensively complex project, you're probably going to have both a scene manager and a game manager, and they're both probably going to be singletons, because you'll have like a whole team that's working on the game manager and a whole other team that's working on the scene manager. But for a small project, 1 or 2, 3 people working on it, you can almost certainly get rid of the scene manager. We don't need that. We're just going to have a game manager. And if you have a really small project, like 1 person writing the code, you can probably get away with just having your player itself be the singleton, but you'll see later on that there's some reasons why that causes a headache. And so for the purposes of today, you can mostly do both, but I'm going to do the game manager version of this. And so some of the consequences of the game manager version is that you're going to have to take some of your code that lives elsewhere, like some of it that probably lives in the player, and you're going to have to copy and paste it into the game manager. And you're probably going to have to change some of your functions. So like, for example, where it used to say, if you collect a coin and you want your coins to go up by 1, you're going to have to collect the coin and then have your game manager coins go up by 1, for example. So not only will you have to like copy and paste a good chunk of code to go into the game manager, you'll also have to probably rewrite some of the code that in other scripts, even the code that's not going into the game manager will have to be rewritten to some degree. So that's one of the cons of going with the game manager route. But I think that like, if you fast forward to like April, May, June, the people that today decided to create a game manager and not be lazy and do the player, those people will be able to build their code faster a few months from now than the people that didn't make that switch. So it's sort of a long-term benefit for a short-term pain, substantial pain. So as the word singleton implies, this is something that there's only going to be one of in the game. So if you have a game like Mario Brothers, where you have a Mario and a Luigi and they're both versions of the player script, then that would complicate things quite a bit. You'd almost certainly want to go to a game manager at that point in time. There's still pros and cons on how you're doing it, but and we'll just get to those. So the the idea of we only want one copy of this code, or one instance of this game manager running our game. We're going to go to pretty great lengths to ensure, like all of the code we write today is just to ensure that we only have one copy of it. And so everything that we do, we're going to basically like throw every trick up our sleeve that we have to ensure that there's only one copy of the thing. So the first one is inside of the script. So I'm going to say inside the game manager script, we're going to create a instance of type game manager, and it's going to be public, and it's going to be this special thing that we've never seen before called static. And then it's going to be of type game manager, or if you're doing this, it'd be of type player. And we're going to call it, the name we're going to give this variable is instance. And that's what pretty much every tutorial I've ever seen for a singleton calls it instance. And that'll kind of become self-evident in a little bit. So why is it important to make this variable public?
So that other scripts can access it.
So that other scripts can access it. This is like the treasure trove of data in your game, and anyone who needs access to this data is going to need to get it through this being public. And then from the word alone, even if you don't know anything about programming, what does the word static tell you? What do you just guess that reserved keyword does?
Makes it so it can't change.
Makes it so it can't change. Because the opposite of static would be like dynamic or whatever, which is like ever changing. This is can't change at all. Okay, and actually it does something special in memory when you declare something static. It reserves that spot in memory and doesn't ever change that spot in memory. That's sort of like more computer sciencey than computer programmery, but it literally does something unique in memory when you put the word static into it. It's like, I'm going to give you a home in memory that I can reference as quickly as I want. I'm always going to know where your home is in memory, and I'm not ever going to change it because it's static. Okay, and so public static game manager instance. And then I have this example here. So first, we're going to check inside of a function called awake. And awake runs, it's similar to start, but it runs before start. So as soon as the program loads, all of the different awake functions run. And then after the last awake function runs, the first start function runs. And then all the start functions run, and then after that, update starts running. So awake runs before any start function runs. And so the idea is that we're doing this check as early into the running of the game as we can. If instance is not nothing, so if instance exists, if it already is there. So here's my example on that. Let's imagine that this is our game manager right here, this quarter. And it is the first instance. And then this quarter comes along and it's checking to see, it runs this code and it says, is instance null? And the answer to that would be no. So if that's the case, this thing checks and says instance is not equal to null, then what does this instance need to do to itself?
Destroy itself.
Destroy itself. So then we're gonna destroy the game object that this is attached to. And then else, so what's the condition for else? Else, then instance is null. So this thing comes along and this one hasn't existed yet. What do we need this to do at that point in time? This becomes the instance. This is the original copy. So we're gonna say else instance equals this. And this is one of those special reserved keywords. You could probably say instance equals game object. I honestly don't know the difference between saying instance equals game object and instance equals this. But I assume that there is one because everyone in the world does that instead of that. Okay, and so the other thing that we want to do here is we want to run this very special function, don't destroy on load. I think these are all capitalized. Don't destroy on load game object.
Not this.
Don't know why. I think that this is the code, and game object is the thing that the code's attached to.
Yep.
I'm not 1,000% sure on that, so I'm not gonna say that for sure.
Given the instances of type game manager, I'm guessing that this is of type code.
Yeah,
Right.
something like that. Very, very straightforward.
Yeah.
Not nuanced at all. So, instance equals this, don't destroy or unload the game object that this thing's attached to. And away we go. We're good. This assures us that we only have one game manager running in the game. And now, here's what happens kind of behind the scenes. So I'm gonna draw the hierarchy. So the hierarchy is the left-hand column in your game where you say everything that's in your scene shows up in the hierarchy, right? So in the hierarchy, usually the first thing in your hierarchy is a camera, and then maybe you have a player, and maybe you have like a coin, and another coin, and an enemy, and the ground, etc., right? Your guys' hierarchies are getting pretty long now. And then you're also gonna have a game manager. And this is probably an empty, it's almost certainly an empty, that you then drug the script onto. You'll notice when you name this thing Game Manager, instead of being a script icon, it changes it to a gear icon. That's a gear.
It's like a sunflower.
Yeah, it's a gear. So it will change it. It will not look like a script anymore. It will look like a gear at that point in time. Don't worry about that. If it changes to a gear, don't panic. It's supposed to do that. Anyways, when you drag that gear onto this empty game object instead of dragging the script onto it, then this thing becomes your game manager. And then this is level 1. And then in level 2, let's say in level 2 you also have a camera. It's level 2's camera, it's not the same as that camera. You have a player. It's level 2's player, it's not the same player as that player. You have a coin, an enemy, a couple grounds. And then you don't want a game manager in level 2. If you have this here, when you switch from level 1 to level 2 and you do don't destroy and unload, there's going to be another game manager, this game manager, and it will say something like don't destroy and unload. It'll be distinguished from this one, and you'll have 2 copies of it. So you can't do that. So what you have to do is delete this one out of your level, and this one will automatically go there. When you look in your scene load, when you switch from scene level 1 to level 2, it will take this with it. So for those, let's back up a little bit. For those of you that decided to be lazy and you went this route, then you would have to delete this out of here, and this version would come over, and it would say something like player, don't destroy, unload. Oops, I wrote that in the wrong line. Anyways, this player comes over, and that becomes problematic when you're trying to lay out and design your level. Why is it problematic?
Its position is saved.
Its position is saved. So this thing's transformed opposition is not where you put it in the scene, because you can't put it in the scene. Instead, its transformed opposition is going to be whatever it was at the moment in time that you switched from level 1 to level 2. And so laying out your scene in the way that you've been laying out your scene and testing your game in the way you've been testing your game becomes very problematic. So if you do go this route, I recommend that you do something like vector 3 spawn point, and you set it up, equals new vector 3 0 0 0, but not those values. Whatever you want your spawn point to be, and then inside of start, you're going to say transform dot position equals spawn point. Something like that. And then in each level, right before you switch from level 1 to level 2, you need to adjust your spawn point. It's sort of a headache, right? And so that's one of the big reasons why I don't recommend going with the player and instead having a game manager. Even with a game manager, you'll still run into a headache, which is that you won't be able to successfully playtest level 2 of your game without playtesting level 1 of your game first.
Why have a Singleton?
Hold on that.
Cool.
So what I recommend doing for playtesting is either not caring about the numbers, or if you really need to worry about the numbers, set your level 1 up so that you are spawning in very, very close to the end of the level. So you spawn in, switch levels, and then playtest level 2. Why have a Singleton in the first place? Because if you want data to persist between levels, this is probably the best way to go. So if you want, let's take Mario as our example. Mario leaves level 1, he has 7 coins. At the start of level 2, he wants those 7 coins. Then those 7 coins need to be kept track of in a singleton that doesn't destroy on load. If you destroy on load, then those 7 coins destroy with it. If you don't destroy on load, they come and bridge the gap to level 2. It's also from the last lesson that we did, where we had some enemies in level 1. This is level 1. This is level 2. We had some enemies in level 1, and we had some enemies in level 2. And if we delete this enemy or collect that coin or pick up that item, and we go to level 2, we get these 3 items, and we go back to level 1, we want the state to remain like this. The only way that's going to work is if you combine the last lesson that we did with a singleton, and then this will all remain in that state. So those are the reasons for singleton. Not everyone's going to need to have it in their game, but almost everyone will. But there might be some exceptions. Questions on any of this?
So do you like hold variables within the singleton?
Yeah. So then your variables that are currently living inside of your player or inside of whatever, those are going to migrate to here. And when you change those variables, they're going to change in here.
The big difference is the scene transitions. Usually when you transition a scene, you like all your stuff stays in the previous scene.
Right.
Like there's not really a good way other than saving loading files to get stuff between scenes, except for this.
Okay. And then if it's static, how do you add stuff to it?
So only this variable is static, but all of the other variables inside of it, the health, the coins, the points, the state of the game, what level you're on, all of that kind of stuff is not static.
So you make other variables within the script
That are public.
correspond to other public and correspond to other variables in the game. Like,
They could be public or private,
Depending on how you use it.
depending on how you use them. And we'll probably have our next lesson be like private variables with public getters, but that's like not part of this conversation explicitly, but that was a conversation that didn't really matter until we did this first.
So if I have like a variable on my player called coins that like when you collide with a coin that goes up, I'd want to put that in the whatever it's called?
Singleton.
Singleton, so that, and then like when I collect a coin, I'd want to update the variable in that so that if I want those coins to
Yeah,
stay
so
on.
in your player script, you will need a reference to the game manager, and the game manager is going to contain the coin. And so then when you collect a coin, it will say game manager.coins plus equals 1.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
does that mean that all of your variables should just be stored in the game manager instead of in the player script?
All variables that you want to survive the transition to the next scene.
Okay.
So like your X direction doesn't need to survive.
Yeah.
Your timer probably doesn't need to survive. But there will be some things that do. So variables that do survive, you're going to copy and paste them and rewrite your code to get them into here. Variables that don't need survive, that are like temporary variables, can stay where they're at.
Would you say it's not really worth it to implement this now into our larger deployments if we're just gonna start working on something else?
Hold on a second. Can you say that again?
Do you think it's even worth it to implement it into our larger game if we're just gonna start working on something else in the week?
I would say implement it this week if you can, simply so that like in the future you have it to reference back to. Like it'd be easy to build and then you would have something to look at 3 months from now when you want it in a different project that you're working on.
I think an important part of this is like you don't need to change many aspects of your game to fit with this. It's just like the next level, making your score, coins, and maybe like items or power-ups crossover. That's all that needs to be in here. Like you don't need a lot of stuff. It can basically just be added on top of stuff just to save your coins, right? And then your player script that like adds or collides with coins just references this instead of coins plus equal one game manager dot coins plus equal one.
And
one.
I would venture to guess that no one in the room has a game more complex than like we could help you migrate this in like 20 minutes. Like it's a 20-minute headache, it's not like a 3-day headache.
I don't think I have any variables that are like compatible with this yet.
Then don't necessarily build it yet. But also think about like what your game might look like in a month or two, and if it's going to matter in a month or two, then start designing it now.
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay, that's it for today.